So, wait 10. And thank you for joining me. I appreciate your patience in waiting for me to conduct the recording. Um, Whoops. Before we move on to the next slide, quick reminder that we had got Aeneas to the region of Campania, and in particular the town of Cumae, where there was a grand temple of Apollo presided over by the Sibyl. Um, Apollo's human priestess who could foretell the future and whom Aeneas needs to see in order to find out um, more about his future and also to gain entry to the underworld. So I just wanted to make that point of continuity with our learning last week. Um, when Aeneas is in Cumae, he approaches the temple of Apollo and asks the Sibyl um, first to foretell his future. Um, and the back and forth between them involves the Sibyl instructing him to make sacrifice, to pray to Apollo, so that she can speak forth the truth. And as Aeneas does so, um, Apollo, and this is a fabulous description of the prophecy process. Apollo actually physically takes possession of the Sybil's body. Apollo enters the Sybil's body. Um, and Virgil describes her look, her size, her voice, her expression changing as the prophecy comes forth um, with, how do I want to say this, a sort of possession, as you might see in a movie, you know, in, uh, from the modern perspective of demonic possession, but in this instance, divine possession. Um, and I suppose another way one could look at it is speaking in tongues, in terms of the Christian tradition of the Holy Spirit taking over the body of worshipers. Now, I don't want to make this into a discussion about comparative religion, but I do want you to know that the Sibyl herself has no access to the future. It's only through the continued favor of Apollo and this process of possession that she is able to tell Aeneas three really important things. Thing number one, he's going to fight a horrendous war in Italy. That war awaits him. Thing number two, a wife also awaits him, and that to win his wife, he's going to have to win this horrendous war. And thing number three, that in order to win the war, he is going to need the help of Greeks. You'll recall, of course, that the Greeks had destroyed Troy and were considered traditionally enemies of the Trojans. But what the Sibyl puts forward is that Aeneas is going to need to seek the help of people who are ethnically Greek but living in Italy, and that their aid will be a key to his success. And I'd like you guys to reflect just for a moment on the need to make peace with one's former enemies, and to come to terms of cooperation. We'll be learning more about that Greek city in our final installment of Aeneas and his journey. Aeneas has asked the Sibyl to take him to the underworld after he learns these things and is kind of um, gobsmacked by the prophecy of the war and getting help from the Greeks and so on. He asks the Sibyl to guide him to the underworld. This is, remember, something that Anchises' ghost in Sicily, in the form of the serpent, had told him he must do. And Aeneas knows that he can't get there himself, but the Sibyl knows the way. And the Sibyl replies, yes, I can take you to the underworld, but there are two conditions for this to happen and for you to return successfully. And she actually kind of makes a little bit of a joke. Virgil has her make a little bit of a sly joke to Aeneas. It's not a ha-ha joke, but the Sibyl says, the way down to Avernus, to the underworld, is easy. The way down to the underworld is easy. In other words, Aeneas, all you have to do is die if you want to get to the underworld. But then she follows that up with not that actual statement, you should die, but rather she says, to get back is the hard part, and I can help you with that. And she sets two conditions, and one of the conditions is easily fulfilled. She tells Aeneas that Maecenas, you'll remember he was one of the Trojans who died on the way to Cumae, or at Cumae, I should say, that Maecenas' body is lying on the shore and that he must be buried. He's lying on the shore at the cape that eventually the Romans named Cape Misenum, and that he must be buried. Otherwise, there's a pollution upon Aeneas and the Trojans for leaving a comrade whose body could be buried, but isn't buried. She also tells Aeneas that in order to enter the underworld while living, he must seek a magical talisman called the Golden Bough. The Golden Bough is a branch that is made of gold with leaves of gold, which grows out of a nice, normal, ordinary tree in the forests that are near the Temple of Apollo. Large forest, and he must seek in the grove for a tree where this branch of gold grows off a normal tree. And she tells him, if the gods think you're worthy to enter the underworld, the branch will come off in your hand if you pull on it. If the gods don't think you are worthy to enter the underworld, there's no way you can remove the branch from the tree. It will stay there no matter what. Either you try to hack it off or whatever. So this is something that doesn't exist in other mythology of people who go to the underworld. You may remember from numerous ancient myths, Orpheus going to retrieve his wife. Theseus descends to the underworld. Heracles descends to the underworld. Odysseus descends to the underworld. So there's this tradition. Most of the people who do descend to the underworld are demigods, like Aeneas, but none of them have to pass a test, except Virgil creates this episode in the Aeneid. Long and short of it, Aeneas finds the Golden Bough with the help of Venus. We're not going to get into too great a detail, but she sends two doves to fly into the forest, and Aeneas recognizes doves are his mother's bird. Since he's been searching for a time and he can't find the Golden Bough, he decides to follow them. And they fly along and land and fly along and land as Aeneas walks. And eventually they land right next to the Golden Bough. And here we see Aeneas depicted pulling the bough from the tree. It comes off with an extra hard tug in Aeneas's hand. So I guess he's worthy. Just a quick note, you're going to notice up here in the upper left corner, the artist has depicted Venus reclining, sort of watching this scene happen, and of course guiding the doves so that Aeneas is able to receive the bough. All right, after finding the bough, Aeneas and his men find Maecenas' body following the Sybil's direction and give him a proper burial. So the two conditions are fulfilled. Um, Everything is good, and Aeneas then returns to the temple of Apollo, where the Sibyl awaits him. She is now not under Apollo's possession. She is just the well informed Sibyl, and tells Aeneas, let's go. Yeah, this is kind of sad. Sorry. I had a former student send me this meme, and I thought I would share it with you. You know, apparently there's no family time for Ascanius. He is left behind, and it's only Aeneas who descends with the Sibyl to the underworld. All right. Um, the descent down to the underworld begins at a lake up above called Avernus. Avernus means the place without birds. Trust me on this. If you happened to watch the video about Pompeii that I posted during Thanksgiving break, it mentioned a portion of the Bay of Naples region called the Phlegraean Fields. These fields where volcanic gases and steam escape from the earth even today. And in the center of that region, there is a lake where the sulfuric gases bubble up through the water and into the air above. And the air can be so toxic that birds, which mistakenly fly over the lake or try to land on it, will actually be gassed to death. And so the reason that this lake is called the Birdless Lake, or the lake without birds, Avernus, um, is because birds have learned to avoid that area and the toxic gases that escape there. It is in that region that there is, according to the ancients, a path to the underworld, which Aeneas and the Sibyl take down, down, and down. And on their way down, they encounter several people. You can see in the background behind Aeneas and the Sibyl, these are the ghosts of the unburied dead. They are waiting their turn to enter the underworld, which cannot happen until they are buried. These people up here are waiting. There's essentially a sort of time limit on their waiting patiently to be buried. But once that time limit is exceeded, you have people trying to crash onto the boat of the ferryman Charon, whose job it is to take the buried dead and only the buried dead across the river Styx. The Styx is the boundary between the land of the living and the land of the properly buried dead. And these poor souls are trapped as ghosts outside the underworld. Sometimes they wander up into the world above. We can see Charon here, the ferryman, with the end of his oar attempting to beat back one of the unburied dead who has dared to climb onto his skiff. Others are crowding forward. All right, TMI, I know. On his way down to the boundary that is the river Styx, Aeneas and the Sibyl encounter the ghost of Palinurus. You'll remember he is Aeneas'S helmsman. He was the one final sacrifice that Neptune required to allow the Trojans to get to Italy at all. His burial never happens by Aeneas's hands. He is still awash in the seas, and so his body hasn't been found, can't be buried. That's not a pollution on Aeneas. But it is a hardship for Palinurus because he cannot find peace in the afterlife. Aeneas speaks to Palinurus and expresses his pity, learns what happened to Palinurus, and that pit of grief deepens in Aeneas' stomach, but it's something that he cannot do anything about. Well, notice here that the Sibyl is waving the golden bow to Charon. The artist has depicted, uh, obviously, the scene just before Aeneas and the Sibyl speak to Charon and demand transportation across. And there is a negotiation with Charon. Charon says, "Who are you? You're alive. I can't take you." And then the Sibyl waves the golden bow and says, "Remember, this allows entry to anyone into the underworld." And at that, Charon grudgingly quiets down and allows the living to enter his boat. If you look at the boat, it doesn't look very river-worthy or seaworthy. It looks old and cracked. And Virgil has a kind of engaging description of how when the living Aeneas and the living Aeneas and the living Sibyl step into it, their weight almost sinks the boat, because they, of course, have living bodies. They're not ghosts the way the others who normally cross are. In any case, they cross the Styx successfully, and as they approach the place where the souls of the dead are housed or confined, whatever you want to call them, they have one more challenge awaiting them. It's in the form of Kerberos. Some people pronounce that Cerberus. I pronounce it Kerberos. He's not a Care Bear, and he's not actually Fluffy, the dog from Harry Potter, but Kerberos, the three-headed dog that is the guardian of the gates of the underworld. His real job is to keep the dead inside. Any dead people who might want to try to get out, Cerberus frightens them back into the underworld. But his secondary job is to keep the living from entering. And he barks rabidly at the Sibyl and Aeneas as they approach. But the Sibyl, in her wisdom, is prepared and throws 3 balls of food, 3 treats, in which she has mixed a sleeping drug. So she throws the 3 treats in front of the 3 heads of Cerberus. Cerberus gobbles them up, and they lull Cerberus to sleep so that the Sibyl and Aeneas are able to pass safely. All right. Don't get lost in the illustration, which is, by the way, not entirely in keeping with Virgil's description of the underworld. Virgil's description of the underworld is incredibly hard to communicate in visually. It's also a challenge to communicate in words, so please forgive me if this is a challenge. But we're going to talk about 2 places, 2 geographical divisions of the underworld. One is Ereboss, which is, generally speaking, the entire realm of Pluto, god of the underworld. And it's where most dead people end up. And most people who are dead and buried, I should say. And in Ereboss, there are subdivisions. We're going to talk about some of the subdivisions. But Ereboss is, in general, the part of the underworld that Pluto controls. And one of the subdivisions is a place called the Lugentes Campi, the Fields of Mourning, or the Mourning Fields. And this is the place where those who have died prematurely, those who have died before they needed to, reside. And it's especially the place where those who have died because of love reside. And here, Aeneas has an encounter with the ghost of Dido. As he is passing through the Lugentes Campi, he recognizes Dido's ghost, standing alone. And He approaches and he asks, "Was the rumor true? Was what I saw, the smoke leaving your homeland, a sign of your death?" And then he says, "I left your homeland, I left you unwillingly." He doesn't quite say, "I am sorry." He does not say, "I loved you." He says, "I left your homeland unwillingly." And he begins to shed tears. And he's trying to have a conversation with Dido and I suppose seek forgiveness or at least express regret at her death. But Dido turns and walks away, says nothing. She's not even looked at him as he says these words. Her eyes are down on the ground, but she turns and walks away and rejoins the ghost of her husband, Sychaeus, who is in the background waiting for her. It's a terribly touching moment in the sense that Aeneas confronts some degree of responsibility for Dido's death, but cannot escape the guilt. Dido won't let him escape guilt for leaving her. He moves on from the Lugentes Campi to also see the ghost of dead Trojan and Greek warriors, several who had died at Troy, including Deiphobus. I could go way too long in this lecture, but suffice it to say that Deiphobus is the third husband of Helen. This is complicated. You, of course, know Menelaus, the Greek husband of Helen. You know about Paris, the Trojan with whom Helen ran off, and they consider that a marriage, so second husband. But after the death of Paris's brother Deiphobus asked for Helen's hand in marriage, and Helen agreed to marry Paris's younger brother Deiphobus. But from the ghost of Deiphobus, Aeneas learned something that he did not know about the night of Troy's destruction. I want you guys to notice Aeneas is going through a sort of emotional turmoil of all of his losses. He's going to be reunited with his father who died in Sicily. He's just been reunited with Dido who died in Africa, and he's being reunited with the Trojans who died at Troy. Oddly enough, he's never reunited with Creusa. We actually never hear that his wife Creusa is in the Underworld. But he is reunited with Deiphobus, who on the night that the Greeks entered Troy was betrayed by Helen. She hid his sword away, the sword that he had kept near to their bed in case there was any type of danger or attack. She hid it away so that he could not find it. And when the Greeks burst in to his home where he had been sleeping, and he was startled awake, he had no means to defend himself. Now, in Virgil's telling of the destruction of Troy, Helen is portrayed as a thrice betrayer. She, of course, betrays Menelaus by running off with Paris. To a degree, she betrays Paris when she marries Deiphobus, but she also betrays Deiphobus to the Greeks. Not a very nice person in Virgil's portrayal of Helen. Now, moving along, after leaving the Lugentes Campi and the fields, the area of the underworld where dead war heroes are, I don't want to say war heroes, the dead, who are ordinary dead warriors are. Aeneas and the Sibyl pass the torture chamber of the underworld, the region called Tartarus. Now, in this depiction, this is the one visual I want to give. We see a person here who is tied and being tortured. There's some kind of sharp object, I don't know what that is, between the and beneath the legs of this fellow who is being tormented. It's not a very realistic depiction of any particular character from Greek mythology, but Tartarus is the place for the torment of the wicked. And the Sibyl tells Aeneas about some of the truly evil humans who have offended against the gods, and how they're punished. Aeneas wants to know more, but the Sibyl says, I can't tell you all about it. And in truth, I, your guide through this lecture, can't tell you about all the people that are being tortured for wickedness, crimes against the gods, and against religion. So, they pass Tartarus, and there's one more stop to make before the reunion with Anchises. At Pluto's palace, which lies on the far edge of Ereboss, close to Tartarus, but not in it. Aeneas approaches the gates, and there he cleanses himself. He washes himself with the waters of the underworld to kind of purify himself, and attaches the golden bough to the gates of the palace. He does not presume to enter and to disturb Pluto and Proserpina, but he attaches the golden bough to the gates of the palace and utters a prayer of thanks for allowing him to enter this underworld for the reunion with his father. He proceeds on to that reunion in a portion of the underworld that is called Elysium, or the Elysian Fields. It is the place where the blessed dead, the dead who have done good things, dwell. And what we're going to find is that it's also the place where, how do I want to say this? The people who have not yet been born, but who are going to do great things, dwell. I could go on, but I know time is short and this is already late. But it is in Elysium that Aeneas has his reunion with Anchises. Anchises is considered one of the blessed dead, and he had brought Aeneas, sent message to Aeneas to come down to the underworld, not just so that they could have a reunion, but essentially so that Anchises could tell Aeneas about the future of the Romans. Not Aeneas's future, but the future that Aeneas will create for Rome and Rome's people. Who are Aeneas's people, after all? In this reunion with Anchises, we get some information about Virgil's vision of the underworld that is, again, kind of out of keeping with other ancient traditions. Anchises acts as a sort of tour guide, and he first shows Aeneas a river, one of the four rivers of the underworld. There's the Styx, and there are various others. But these, the river, one of the rivers of the underworld is called Lethe. It's related to the Greek word for forgetting. It actually means the river of forgetfulness. It's where we get our word lethal, lethal meaning deadly, because the river Lethe is in the underworld. It's associated with death. But long and short of it, with apologies for making this so long, and Anchises tells Aeneas that the souls of the yet to be born are confined in the underworld, And they while they're in the underworld, these great people who are yet to be born, they know who they are. They know something of their future, the future they're going to have up in the land of the living. But before they exit the underworld to be born, they drink from the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, so that when they enter life, they don't know who they are. And like you or I, we don't know who we are until we grow up, we find out our talents and our skills, and we learn from life's experiences. Suffice it to say that these souls of glorious unborn Romans that live in this part of the underworld in Elysium include Romulus. They include members of the family of Julius Caesar. They include other great heroes from Roman history. Roman history as we know it, but it's a history that hasn't unfolded yet when Anchises shows these heroes' souls to Aeneas and says, "Oh, there's Romulus. Look at him wearing the wolf's hide. Oh, there's Cassus, the great consul who killed one of his, who killed the Gallic king in hand-to-hand combat. Oh, there's Skywala with his left hand, but not his right. Oh, there's Augustus's son-in-law, Marcellus, who was going to take over as emperor when Augustus had designated a successor. But Marcellus died tragically young. And long and short of it, Aeneas receives a virtual tour of the highlights of Roman history from his father. And then his father says to Aeneas, here is the mission of Rome. You're about to leave the underworld. You need to go on. Here is your mission. He calls Aeneas a Roman. He says, remember, Roman, to beat down the proud in war. To beat down the proud in war. But to spare those who have been conquered. And he says, other peoples will have other talents. Your job, Roman, is to beat down the proud in war and to spare the conquered. To establish laws, and by establishing laws, to rule peacefully. That's Aeneas's parting message when he departs from the underworld. It's also, I think, what Virgil envisions Rome to be at its best. A nation that conquers, but that spares those who have been conquered, and establishes lawful rule and authority for people under Rome's control. All right, that's where I'm going to have to stop the video because, of course, this is running long. Ciao, folks. Thank you for your patience. And if you can, come on to Latin Club a little bit later today. And have a great rest of your Friday. Bye-bye.